Hey, everybody. Welcome to another installment of Wellness Wednesdays. I am glad that you are here on tonight. Uh, if this is your first time coming and joining us, my name is James Perkins. I'm a counselor coach here in North Carolina. I'm passionate about what I do. I love counseling, love therapy, love coaching. So if you're in the need of my services, I would love to connect with you. And you could just simply do that by clicking on James Perkins .help. I'll have it down here at the bottom of the screen. But as you're coming on in, let me know where you are chiming in from. I would love to greet you. Uh, and I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation on tonight. So yeah, do two things for me. One is you're coming on in, let me know where you're chiming in from. And then also, we love to share. All of our conversations, I think, will benefit um, anybody that is seeking to improve their sense of emotional and mental wellness. So if you have a friend or a family member that you think should be included, tag them here. And we're going to have a great conversation with a great friend and special guest on tonight. Let me do something on my end to make sure we are up and running smoothly. And we were going to get started. Awesome. So yeah, again, as you go coming in, giving people a couple of moments to join our conversation tonight. Um, this is going to be a good one. There's a lot that has transpired, and couldn't think of a more appropriate guest to have with me on tonight to talk about it. And so I'm glad that you are here with me. Share on my end. Perfect. Should be included. Tag them here. Awesome. Perfect. Awesome. Perfect. Great. Thank you guys for attending on tonight. We're going to have a great conversation with a special friend of mine, Dr. Cynthia Lang, too. And I'm going to bring her on in a moment. But I wanted to again introduce myself. My name is James Perkins. I'm a counselor here in North Carolina. And the main reason why I started Wellness Wednesdays was really to help people by providing tools and strategies to help them improve and cultivate their mental and emotional wellness. I think our emotional and mental wellness should be a priority. And sometimes, to be honest, that kind of slips to the side. And really, how I define wellness is really our ability to understand how our thoughts and actions, or excuse me, thoughts and emotions impact our actions. And when we have a good awareness of how our emotions and how we're thinking about what we're thinking about is impacting our well-being, then it puts us in a position of being able to make changes that will help us to improve our sense of well-being and to also improve our quality of life. I think sometimes people mix up standard of living with quality of life, and those two things are different. And really, the only way I think, or one of the big primary ways to improve your quality of life is by having a good sense of mental and emotional wellness. So I'm glad to have my friend tonight, Dr. Cynthia Lang too. I'm going to bring her on, and we're going to be having a discussion really about several things, but all centered around wellness. When we originally scheduled this conversation um, about a couple of weeks ago, we didn't know that our dear brother George Floyd was going to be murdered, and that has set off a domino effect of a lot of things, a lot of emotions for people to be dealing with. So there's a lot that I think we all need to process, and so I wanted to create an opportunity for us to have that on tonight. So I'm going to bring my good friend Dr. Cynthia Lang online. Make sure she is perfect. Dr. Langtu, how are we doing?
Yes, right?
Yes, this is
That
it.
is the question of the hour. I was just talking to a really great friend of mine, and he asked me, how I'm doing, and I said, "You're the
Mhm.
fifth person to ask me that today, and each time it's been different." And I think that captures this time, James. And I really loved what you said, about figuring out what we're doing at this time, and
Mhm.
thinking about the measures of success, measures of wellness, right? And how that is radically different during the layered natures of stress of this time. Yeah.
Man, this is like I'm telling you. So before we, this is so me and Dr. Cynthia Langtu, we talk, we jump right into conversations like this all the time. They're natural, they're
We
organic,
do.
and
We do.
and so for the people who don't know you, Dr. Langtu, please give us an introduction to who you are, what you do, and what you're passionate about.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for what you do. And that mental health is my big public health platform.
Yes.
It is the issue of the time. So I am all about what you're doing. My name is Cynthia Lubin Langtu. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, a Haitian licensed clinical psychologist here in Chicago. I'm also a professor of clinical psychology at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, where I get to mentor and teach an amazing group of humans who will and have changed the world for the better with respect to wellness. And so super proud of that. I'm a mom of two amazing boys, and I'll talk a bit about that today. And there are so many other identities that I hold, but those are some of the big ones that I think that are relevant to our conversation today. So I'm really looking forward to how this unfolds and all that we'll learn together.
Me too. It's wonderful. Guys, this is going to be a great conversation. Again, as you're coming on in, let me know where you're chiming in from. Our mutual friend is on tonight, Dr. Cynthia Lanita Dunlap. Good to see you, sister.
Hey!
Oh, Lanita. Oh, man. Laura, have my other counseling buddies. Laura, good to see you, girl. Thank you that you're
Yeah.
here. Haven't seen you in a good while, probably since grad school. So it's good to see you up here. And so, yeah, this is going to be a great conversation. Dr. Cynthia, I know that a big part of your work is focus on trauma. And we're gonna both have a conversation about how we're doing. But I did want to ask you, why did you even decide to even choose trauma as a big focus for you in the very first place?
Yeah, that's I have a short answer and I have a long answer, but I'll give the one that I think speaks to the heart of this time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way that I think about trauma is that there's a way that we're meant to be connected. That I'm such a relational person. There's a way that we're meant to be connected to ourselves and to each other and to our larger societies. There's a way that there's a synergy that's supposed to happen. I think that's how God created us, how God wants us to live out our lives and be. I think that there are things that can happen individually, in one another relationships, and then within larger societies that can break that, right?
Yep.
That harm that. And that's what I think about when I think about trauma. I think that trauma occurs when our ability to manage what is being offered to us overwhelms our resources. Like
Wow.
it's too much. And that happens in a one another relationship, but it also happens in a larger system. And we will get into how we're seeing that unfold today, specifically with respect to racialized trauma. But there are so many other levels of that systemic
Yeah.
pain that we're seeing exhibited, but then the one another pain. Along those lines, I, try to teach my kids coping mechanisms and, how to manage. And one of my sons, he was having a rough time one of these days because, everything. And he said to me, Mom, I tried all my strategies. I did my deep breathing, I did my meditation, and none of it worked. And I said, buddy, this is an overwhelming time. And you did a great job using your strategies. You need more. This is a big time.
Yeah.
And it's overwhelming your strategies. And I get it. I've had those moments too. And I think that was such a beautiful moment of recognition that we can have all the coping resources in the world, but that this time is likely to overwhelm anyone's
Yep.
ability to manage. And I think that having conversations like this one, naming that, and naming the truth of that, making our peace and way through it together is the way that we'll make it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So this brings me back even to the first question that I was going to ask you about, how are you doing? And it's funny, well, not funny, but interesting that probably, I think for a large majority of people, if you would have asked that question before the pandemic, we ask that question, but sometimes we don't often want the answer, or maybe you're afraid of the answer the person may give us, because we're so busy rushing from here to there. For some people, just their pace of living hasn't allotted them that time and space to process their emotions. So when somebody asks them, like, how are you doing? Sometimes people really don't know. And the interesting thing that this pandemic has created is, for some people, a whole new dynamic. And so when I ask people, how are you doing? I'm really like even more now concerned about, how are you doing? How are you holding up? How are you managing?
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I will answer in just a moment. But I want to say that one of the things that this time has done that I think has been really beautiful is that it's brought us to a more tender place.
Wow.
It's brought us to a place where I do open my email saying, I hope you and your people are making it through and follow. And my prayer is that on the other side of this, and there will be another side, right? On the other side of this, that we'll carry some of these lessons of tenderness, of slowing down, of looking at each other in the eye and asking how you're doing, and actually answering, and knowing that the other person actually wants an answer and is willing to provide the space for that answer. The other thing that I hope and I pray that we take out of this time is that the idea that it's okay to not be okay. Like, if you were to ask me how I'm doing, I would say, oh my gosh. Like, you'd be like, during this time, that's okay. And my prayer is that we take that with us, that when we sit with a friend or a stranger, that there's space and normality for things not to be okay, right? And that we don't rush past the tough feelings, but that we create and allow space for each other to move through those tough feelings together. So you asked how I was doing. I'm gonna tell you the truth. And I laugh a lot, right? And it's part of the way that I move through the world. And that's not to minimize the pain of this time. I am the mom of two beautiful, almost men, Black boys. And so to say that my heart has broken open again and again and again is an understatement. To say that there are tears that my soul has cried and will continue to cry whenever I think about breath. I still couldn't breathe from Eric Garner 5 years ago, right?
Still have not got over that.
So how am I doing? I'm holding that soul cry. I'm also playing games with my kids, and we're doing a slumber party in the living room. I'm having tough conversations with them. And my soul is grieved by seeing the look in their eyes of confusion. My 14-year-old son said, Mom, something big happened, because I don't let them watch the news. That's part of our self-care. We don't let certain things enter our home and our space, our spirit, because it's too disruptive. And I want to help titrate what my sons take in. But he knew. And he said, Mommy, something big happened. What is it? And I think he was waiting to see if I would tell him the full truth. And of course, the full truth would be too much.
It would be.
The full truth would be too much. And so I had to navigate letting him know something really bad happened, and that there were a lot of people grieving and hurting, but also working really hard to make it right. But that it's hard to make right some things.
Yeah.
You know, like you can only make it as right as you can. And I gave him a little bit more detail, but not much more. And he let it go. But it's because he trusted that I would tell him what he needed to know. Or maybe he was just annoyed with me. I'm not sure which one. You can ask him later. So, but then there was the pain of that, you know, the pain of having to sort of strip away the innocence of my boy, right? One of the things that happened early in the quarantine here in Chicago for me, you know, there was a part of me that was, you know, somewhat thinking, I'm going to get so much work done. There's been you know how much I love to read.
Yeah.
You probably have the same stack of books I do.
Yes.
There are all these books I've wanted to read for so long, right? On my bedside table in the living
Ready
room.
to go.
I'm going to get so much reading done. And I went to, because it's one of my ways of coping. It's one of the ways that I escape in a healthy manner and settle my soul, right? That and cooking, right?
Yes.
Much to my consternation, reading wasn't energizing. Reading was actually draining my energy. And I had to allow myself to mourn that. I had to allow myself to say, this was a thing that was really helpful to me in the past, and now it's not this moment. And my prayer is that one day that it will be again. And so I had to let myself grieve that. And then, you know, on the grieving note, I think that's another piece that's so important about this time. There was a part of me that almost felt guilty about grieving reading, right? When people were losing their parents, people were unable to see their families in their nursing homes. These really big, horrific things were happening. And I was grieving not being able to read. And I had to say, Cynthia, you know what? You get to grieve that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't and isn't diminished by the fact that there are these other really big losses happening as well. So I think part of my making peace with this time is letting myself grieve both the small losses and the big losses, and that's okay. And that giving myself that space to not be okay with whatever it is. And the other piece of that is giving, you know, the people around me, my kids in particular, that space as well, like space for them to not be okay, space for them to grieve the big and little. Luckily, I have been able to cook, so there's been a lot of eating going on up in here. So that's been fun. That's been fun and good. And so that's part of the up and down too, right? And so how have I been? My soul is grieved. My soul is pained. I'm learning a lot. I'm letting myself learn a lot. I'm tending to all of the tender feelings as much as I can, you know. I'm trying to laugh. I'm trying to find moments of levity with my kids, but not force them. Yeah, so that's a bit about how I'm doing. The other thing that's been really helpful, and that's part of why I'm so grateful to be here with you, is that, you know, I have a unique set of skills that I bring to the table, and being able to use those in the service of supporting those on the front line and doing this work has been so meaningful. So for me, finding productive ways to use the unique set of skills that I have to benefit others in this time has felt really beautiful. You know, my kids, my students, of course, you know, to really be there with and for them, the amazing nonprofit organizations with whom I work, being able to be there and use the skills that God has offered me and allowed me to bloom in the service of something better, in the service of light has been a healing. So this time right here with you is part of my healing.
This is doing my soul a lot of good, and I reflect a lot of your sentiments, all of them, and I concur. What I hear you saying is that you've created space to be present and to normalize the reality that you're in this moment. And I have shared with my wife that on a couple of days, the day that I heard about George Floyd, had a chance to watch the video, but I immediately, the two emotions that I immediately felt or I felt myself in that moment initially wanting to repress the reality of what happened because
Mhm.
I felt emotionally exhausted
Yeah.
that this is happening again.
Yeah.
And like you said, to add that to what we're facing with the pandemic, I'm just like,
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
is just too
Mhm.
much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I can imagine um, just thinking about people who don't have the resources to adequately, emotional resources to adequately process all of what's going on. Two things that end up happening. One, they don't process their emotions. And as my mentor, Pete Scazzaro, says that, unprocessed emotions don't die. They just leak into other areas of our life. And so that's a really important reality. And then the other thing that I felt that you said that I think was just like spot on
Mm.
is grieving our losses, both small and great.
Yeah.
I think one of the realities um, that we're faced with is we have sometimes we only consider and give ourselves permission to grieve what we perceive as a significant loss. So the loss of a loved one, mainly, but we rarely ever consider that the loss of reading,
Yeah.
the loss of the enjoyment of reading, is a loss that
Oh.
we can mourn, or the loss
Yeah.
of not being able to do a certain activity in the way that we wanted to originally.
Yeah.
Um, that when we create space to actually mourn both the great losses and the small losses, we actually create more emotional capacity to
Yeah.
and to live.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, so real. And
Yeah.
the opening up of emotional capacity during this time. Oh
Yes.
my goodness. I think that's been one of the beauties of this time. Can I read a poem that really
Absolutely.
moved
Please
me?
do.
I'm going to read this poem and, whew, okay, I'm just going to read it and then I'll talk some more. Absolutely Clear by Hafiz.
Mm,
Don't surrender your loneliness so quickly. Let it cut more deep.
mm,
Let it ferment and season you as few human or even divine ingredients can.
mm.
Something missing in my heart tonight has made my eyes so soft, my voice so tender, my need of God absolutely clear.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think that part of the reason that poem, one of the women in my women's circle shared it, part of why that resonated so deeply for me is that that's what this time is. It's this tender crucible, right? And we're raw and we're moving through, right? But if we allow ourselves to get really quiet
Mm.
and feel some more and feel
Yeah.
some more, all the lessons,
Yeah.
all the lessons and the ability to see God, right? In
Yeah.
all of the ways that we think about God, creator, connection,
Hmm.
love, all
Yeah.
of those, right? To be able to really, um, and that, for me and my faith upbringing, one of the things that I sort of learned um, is this idea of being positive and hopeful. And I
Mm.
think that's beautiful. I think that hope, well, I have a lot to say about hope, and I'll
Yes.
say something else around hope, and looking forward and opening up. And,
Hmm.
Dr. Maya Angelou says, every storm runs out of rain. And boy, do we need that in this moment, because it's like, well, it just keeps raining. On
Yes.
Saturday night, I was like, well, was that the fourth round of the storm or what?
Come
When they put
on.
the curfew on top of the quarantine, I was like, I thought
On
I was
top of
supposed
the
to be on.
quarantine.
So I was like, okay, amen, amen, amen. So, but every storm runs out of rain, and I have to remind myself and of hope and of beauty and of light. But I think what can happen though, and the beauty of staying in that pained moment, that tender moment, that
Hmm.
moment that's just between you and God of moving through, is that's where some of the lessons happen. That's where
Yeah.
some of the learning, that is the crucible, right? I was talking to a girlfriend on Sunday morning, and we talk about being refined by fire.
Wow.
But I'm gonna speak for myself. I forget the fire is hot.
Yeah.
And I'm being refined. I'm like, wow, this is hot. Like,
Yes.
and you're
Yes.
like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's what fire is, and allowing that. And I think one of the lessons that I've learned in my faith tradition was not necessarily helpful. This toxic positivity that runs past the pain.
Man.
Don't be sad, don't cry. God is good, and God is good.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to feel pain.
Yeah.
Right. And here's the quandary of it. Here's the really interesting sort of tension, is that what I found is that when I actually allow myself to just sit with the pain and say, wow, this is hard. This is hot. Like, you actually move through it quicker than when you fight and resist
You try to repress it.
and you suffer. Right. And that's where the suffering for me is. That suffering is in the resistance to the pain. This idea that we shouldn't have pain, we shouldn't experience pain. Now, I don't think that I should go inflicting pain on others, and I don't think others should inflict pain on me. But pain is part of the human condition and the human experience. The suffering comes in the resistance.
I believe that to be true.
And I have to learn that lesson again and again and again. And one of the beauties of this time is that God has been allowing me to slow down in that lesson, and to not rush anybody else through it either. I'll tell another quick story around loss and grieving. My son's birthday was a couple of weeks ago, and he was really sad that that we weren't going to have the kind of celebration that he hoped for, coupled with the fact that he's graduating from 8th grade and isn't going to graduate with friends. So a lot of losses that he was having to take in. So we really did his birthday up. We did one of the little parades. We did a Zoom call, people saying happy birthday. We fixed all his favorite foods and desserts. It was really sweet. And so I was like, okay, I think we did good. Mom and Daddy did good, right? And that night, as we finished our devotional, we went through our gratitudes. And he said to me, you know what, Mommy? I'm really sad that I didn't get to celebrate with my friends. And there was a part of me that rushed through, and I was like, but. And I'm so grateful for meditation. I'm so grateful for prayer. I'm so grateful for being centered, because I let myself have that moment, and then I focused on him.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, he gets to be sad. He gets to say, yeah, today was great. The cake was nice. The brownie was nice. And I'm sad I didn't get to celebrate with my friends. And I said, oh, buddy, I get it. You're sad you didn't get to celebrate with your friends. That's a bummer. And it wasn't a reflection on me. I'm not a bad parent because he didn't get to celebrate with his friends. And I think that can be so difficult to do when we're not okay with being in pain and letting somebody move through the pain and providing space for that. And that's also the other piece of that, is that I didn't want to steal the lesson that God has for him, right?
Absolutely.
Like, God allowed that sadness.
Yes.
God allowed that pain, and if I were to fix it with another piece of cake or push him past it, like, there wouldn't be space for that learning. And that learning is between him and God, not me and him, and so providing that kind of space for each other is another really important piece that I've been seeing so clearly in learning.
This brings me to a good question. For those individuals who may be listening and are having a hard time trying to identify their present reality, if you will, from your perspective, what are some of the kind of the warning signs? Warning signs that let us know that we need to stop, we need to slow down, not processing our emotions. When I was doing some clinical work when I was in grad school, one of the first realities I I came across in doing counseling
Mm-hmm.
um, is one, not to presume that everybody has the same level of self-awareness. And and so I learned very quickly, like, man, for some people, they were just so attuned and in tune and connected, they were able and readily able to recognize and connect and feel, actually feel what they're feeling, their emotions, if you will. But then I had clients who were just because of life circumstances
Yeah.
and upbringing, um, emotional wellness was not a priority, and so they were unaware of the things that triggered them.
Yeah.
They were unaware simply of the warning signs, if you will, that they were already um, um, that they were already getting warning signs, if you will, for them to stop down, but they just didn't have the eyesight to see that. What are
Yeah.
some of the warning signs that you think
Yeah.
are important
Thank you so much for
to
that question.
recognize?
So
Yeah.
important. And I want to talk about this across the lifespan because I know some of your guests likely have children they're tending to or older
Mhm.
adults they're tending to.
Yes.
And so, I would say the first thing that I do, with any of my clients, I do have a small private practice as well. And so I always check in on how your body's doing, right?
Mm.
How is your eating? How is your
Mhm.
sleeping? And how is your movement? So eating, are you eating more or less than you have before?
Man.
Right? Are you sleeping more or less than you have before? One of
Mm.
the things that's
Good.
really come up, and there's a lot of research around it actually. One day we were at lunch, the boys and I, and we were joking about our COVID-19 dreams. And they were like, so many people are having more vivid dreams or nightmares, and so I think some of the things that come up in our dreams and during our sleep is telling us part of what's going on for us.
Yeah.
If you're unable to fall asleep or stay asleep, any big changes in that. And the other thing that I would say is movement. Like, how is your movement now? Is it more or less than before? For many people, it's less. And I would say move more. There's so much research around how any type of movement and exercise increases endorphins, which make us feel better. It's basically a hormone that tells your body and your mind that you're doing well. So the more you move, the better you'll feel. So paying attention to all of those things with kids and variations in your feelings. So paying attention to your body and then variations in how you're feeling. Do you find that you're more labile, like you're much more up and down than you have been before? And I have not talked to a person during this time who has not experienced that.
Yes.
And so that's something to really pay attention to, not being able to name your feelings even more than before. One of the things that I would say to pay attention to with respect to the children with whom you're living, working, being, is paying attention to their play. And I would say that, from the little ones who can't speak yet, who don't have language, and we forget about the older ones, right? And so many of you have, youth that are home from college or who are now back home quarantined with you or staying with you for the summer, paying attention to the older teens and emerging adults, that they are still in movement and development as well, and that a lot of this might be unfolding for them. But across the board, to pay attention to play. What are the changes in play? What is the tenor of their play? Is it more violent? Is there more fear expressed? Is there more uncertainty expressed? And of course, to get down on the floor and be playing with them, board games to, with little toys, to get a sense, because for kids in particular, their play is their emotional world. And so the extent to which you can attend to that really gives you a sense of what's going on for them. And of course, paying attention to their eating, sleeping, and movement as well. So I would say also paying attention to your energy levels. And for me, like sitting and reading, I realized that I was having a hard time concentrating. It was hard for me it didn't pick me up. It made me feel more down. And so that's how I knew that my energy was shifting. And so what are the activities that bring you energy? What are the activities that drain your energy? In my home, we no longer have the television on, well, we haven't for a very long time, on the news. I used to every morning turn on the news on the radio. I don't do that anymore. I do find a couple of news sources that send me a daily update, and I read them. And I find that doesn't drain my energy in the way that watching and hearing does. And so paying attention to that for yourself. What are you taking in? Right? Another piece that I really want to sit with, certainly during the first part of COVID-19 as we quarantined in the US, but
Mm-hmm.
even more so now with all of the, racial tensions, is the increased abuse and violence
Right.
in
Yes.
all communities and across, and it's not, it's across all communities and across all socioeconomic statuses and whatnot, that abuse and violence towards those who are marginalized and is increased. So towards women, kids, and older adults who are vulnerable as well. And so I think that that's something for everyone to be paying attention to. The last thing that I'll talk about is coping. We talked about coping strategies, and we all have coping strategies that are more or less helpful, right? If you find yourself returning to a past addiction, pay attention to that. And I would say not to judge yourself or beat yourself up, but to pay attention to what that's about. Talk to a friend, talk to a trusted loved one, talk to a therapist, right?
Yeah.
And if it's not an addiction, do you find yourself needing certain things? Do you find yourself needing a glass of wine or a shot of bourbon? Or do you find yourself needing to check social media, right? Do you find yourself needing certain things that aren't necessarily a need, but a desire, certain foods or whatever the case? You know the drill for yourself. And there's nothing inherently wrong about any of these things, but do you find yourself relying on them in a way that actually drains your energy instead of gives you energy? And that's what I would say is a good gauge for yourself. Like, I can't tell you how much to drink or eat or be online, but at the end of the day, if you feel energized or not. So, okay, that was a long one. More questions?
No, but that was good. I think that's a good list for people to be able to find themselves on and identify where they're at and where they need to probably recalibrate. I found myself on that list, having to think about my energy levels as it relates to how much sleep am I getting. Try to control definitely my amount of news and the method that I'm getting in, because that for me that drains my energy, because I don't feel like sometimes they dump it on me and I'm left with the responsibility of having to process through it. I'm like, that's not fair to me. So I have to put some parameters around that.
Yeah.
And so, and I think you said reaching out, this is probably one of a really important time to stay connected. I think the tendency is to isolate, but this is really if not one of the most important times where you really need an intentional community to be a part of. And like you said, is no shame in reaching out for therapy if you need to talk to someone. You have one good guy right here, two good people right here. Matter of fact, JamesPerkins.help, selfish plug. If you need to talk, I'm here. What time? We have Dr. Cynthia Lang too. And so I think this is good. I want to revisit something that you already touched on, because I know there are people who are listening who have kids, are managing, trying their best to manage. One question that's already at the top of my head is, and I think you said some things that were kind of gave me a cue that you were already doing that with your boys, and that is, what are the best ways for us to protect the innocence of our children while also holding space for our reality, if you will?
I mean, that's such an important question, particularly as it relates to the racialized trauma. And for me as a Black mom, I think about my Black children, my Black boys, but it's much broader than that. Like, we all have children who are experiencing structural racism, right? Who are part of this larger system. And how do we think about teaching them about being anti-racist? All of our children, right? All of our children, and to have anti-racist principles, but not overwhelm them with information that's scary or that they can't really take in, right? Actually, right before this, I was listening to this wonderful interview of Dr. Beverly Tatum, who was the president of Spelman, and she wrote "Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria," which is a wonderful book in terms of talking about race. And Dr. Kira Franklin, I believe, was interviewing her. I think I got the last name wrong. I'll come back to it. But I say all this to say, figuring out, and I can also send a chart of really important ways that you can talk to your kids about at different developmental stages about things that they're experiencing and seeing. And so, but you know your kids, gauging what they can handle information wise and giving them what they ask for. So my son asked me what happened, and I tried to figure out how to answer that question and that question alone. I think sometimes we can go on these like diatribes, and my kids always joke, they're like, "Thanks for letting us come to your TED Talk, Mom," like, because everything is a lecture. But sometimes the most simple responses, right, answering their specific question and not expounding beyond what they're ready for, can be really helpful. So I think that that's one really important clue. I think another thing that's very important is to make sure that there are times and spaces that aren't as heavy for your kids to just hang out with you and ask questions. And so for one of my sons, we always do an evening devotional. We do our gratitude practice together at night, and lights out. That is his time to ask every question under the sun. Now, part of it, since he was young, was his strategy to keep from sleeping. And I know that. But another part of it is that's when he's feeling more relaxed. That's when he's feeling less inhibited and can actually talk about some of the things that he's feeling and thinking and wondering about. And so making sure that we have those times and spaces that are not as intense or heavy, that our kids can just kind of meander with us in conversation. I'm an adamant stickler about, having our meals together at the table. Right. And that's part of the reason, that we're doing that. So those are some of the things that I would do is to provide those spaces. I know one of the questions that, and this is a strategy that I love offering in the psychotherapeutic space. Some families have, older teens that are, just don't want to talk as much and are not willing to like sit and have a conversation. And so one of the strategies that I love is a notebook. Right. And the notebook could be each week, each day, whatever the case is. But I would say if you're going to do it, that each party that says they're going to do it has to actually follow through. But you can have a question, a thought, an emotion, and just write it on that day or whatever day you decide. And then the parent and the child. And so it could be a conversation. So it could be a conversation starter. Or it could be what we write in the notebook stays in the notebook, and we don't have to talk about it for those who don't. Really giving the autonomy to the youth, to decide what they talk about. And of course, it'll come up in other ways. And then for us as parents, right, to dial down the anxiety, to trust that this youth will be okay, and to provide the space for them to blossom. And that's more the work for the parent than anything, but it's such an important piece of work because our kids vibe off of what's going on for us, right? Like we never have to say, I didn't say anything. Well, I did say on Friday to my son when things were like getting really, I said, I'm going to be really weird this weekend and give you a lot of hugs and kisses, so just get used to it. It's going to be weird. And so there was that, but I think there was a way that he knew that my soul was unsettled this weekend. And it was. It was. I wasn't crying or putting it on him, but I was having a hard time. And I think sometimes it's okay for our kids to know that we're having a hard time. And they also know that I'm journaling, that I'm talking to my friends. They knew that I was having my women's circle where I was going to get to talk about some really important things that were on my heart. So they know the ways and the strategies, and I'm very vocal with them about the strategies that I'm using to take really good care of myself, because that's of the utmost importance. And I let them know that. Right. And that's so important. So those are some of the things that I would do to make sure that I'm meeting my kids where they are, and that you can do the same with yours.
This, really encouraged, and it just reminds me that so much of what we're able to provide, that are a huge part of our children's emotional wellness is tied to how we show up for them. And so I just hear you echoing again that one of the best ways that we can do that is to take care of our own emotional wellness,
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
and
Right.
that
Mhm.
no, let you fix that just really allows us, I think, to show up in a significant way. And I love that notebook idea, guys. I have, if you have some questions, please drop them. I
Oh
already
yeah,
have
please
one
do.
for you, Dr. Cynthia. My good brother Shanga, I'm going to put it on the screen. He asked, "Can you talk about how to transition your mind when you're so hard on yourself about not being productive during the pandemic?" That
Yeah.
is an awesome question, Shanga. Thank you, brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Actually, one of the things I was going to go into is one of the things that's really, it was big before the pandemic, but certainly is now, is
Mhm.
that all of this, right? All of what we have in our home, like we pour and pour and pour all kinds of grace and mercy and compassion and self-compassion, right? And so I talk to my kids about how I'm being compassionate with myself, how I'm having a hard time, but mom is going to be really nice to herself. When they do something that's, that there's a lot of grace and mercy for them. And then
Yeah,
I request grace and mercy too. I say, mama messes up sometimes. And I need
yeah.
your grace and mercy as well. I'm going to apologize. I'm going to make it right. But in our home, we do grace and mercy. But I cannot do grace and mercy for my kids if I don't pour tons of grace and mercy and
Mm,
self-compassion over myself. So I would say, Shanga, thank you for that question, that this time is a time of slowing down and lots of grace and compassion. And I know if you're like me, you probably have a lot to actually do. Like I'm teaching a
mhm.
class this summer. Like no one else is going to grade my paper. Like I have to grade them. I have to, And so there's the realities, right?
Mhm.
But then there's also being soft and gentle with yourself.
Yes.
And that it starts with you. You can't offer anyone else what you don't offer yourself. And so I
Mm,
would say manage the expectations of this time. We're not going to be working 40-hour work weeks.
mm.
I was working way more before that, but that's a whole other question. But we're not going to have the same level of productivity that we had before. And that's okay. And I want to say, in terms of being a shameless leader, that as a manager, and I do a lot of work around being a trauma informed workplace, that
Mhm.
part of being a really great manager, a really great leader, a really great visionary is recognizing, right, the pushes and pulls that the people who work with you and support your
Yes.
organization can offer, and that you lead the way, right? As a
Yes.
shameless leader, you lead the way of grace and mercy and offering
Mhm.
proactively, checking in on the people that work with you,
Yes.
proactively asking them to slow down, proactively helping them to manage their expectations
Yes.
in a way that leaves them whole and emotionally
Mhm.
healthy. And so I would say that that is a plug for the kind of leader that will blossom in this time and see their folks blossom in this time is the kind of leader who can offer that kind of space proactively, but then also for each of us to be modeling and practicing that in our own lives and in our work.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, that is um, the reality that, actually, I was reading an article and it just shared, I think it was from Harvard, and it was sharing really how what makes, if all things are equal and you have CEOs, leaders that line up each other, they have the same pedigree, the same um, background, socioeconomic status. The biggest difference, two of the biggest differences were their emotional intelligence and just the ability to model and be transparent. Like this reality of being proactively engaged in the emotional wellness process of the people that you lead and that you're responsible for. It has so many benefits, but it's because you can't tie a number value to it. It's one of the things that people don't automatically think about as
Yeah,
a benefit or skill that they can acquire that they can already know. Well,
yeah,
add emotional wellness to my resource toolkit, then I can add another couple of million at the end of the year. It don't
Yeah.
think like that, but the benefits are so far reaching when we're able to model and be transparent
Absolutely.
and help our the people that we're responsible for manage our expectations by
Yeah.
just showing up.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm teaching a family therapy course this summer, and last week we met, and I had to open up space and say, I would be remiss to not open up space for everything going on in the world right now.
yes,
And so many students responded in class, but then later too. And so it speaks to the need for those who have positions of power to be cognizant and aware of the things that are impacting the people around them and to make space for that. Like that's
yeah.
critical during this time, for the wellness, for individual wellness, but actually for the wellness of your business, for your academic
Mhm.
endeavors. That has to be central, right? Like it would
Yes.
be, I reached out to all of my students, via email, checking in and asking, I know this is a tough time. How are you? Like what do
Yeah.
you need from me? And that's critical, right? Because a couple of students did reach out to me, but it
Mhm.
took me saying, this is the space where you can talk about that. This is the space
Yes.
where you ought to talk about that. And I can help you manage your expectations around it. So being that kind of leader is critical as well. And then, managing your expectations for yourself. You're
Mhm.
not going to get everything done. There are some folks, who started this whole thing, with all kinds of home improvement projects. I was like, I'm just trying to make it to the next day,
Next day.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. If you redid your kitchen, that's awesome. Post beautiful pictures and I will like. And if you got up and made breakfast for your kids, that's awesome too. If you
Yeah.
made them make their own breakfast, that's awesome too.
Or two.
You're awesome. That's it. That's the
Take
message.
it a day at a time.
You're awesome. Yeah.
This
And
is
I
good.
say that joking, but not really. Like that's
Yeah.
real. Like we have to create spaces where and create spaces for others where we help them manage expectations. So I'm in a couple of different chat groups with different groups of girlfriends in particular, and many of them are moms, some of them are not, and we send these jokes around, I fed my kid, I did this, I did that,
Yes.
but then we also have these deep conversations, like helping each other manage our expectations of how we're going to show up for our kids, right? And being able to see each other and see that mirrored, and that building of community is critical. Like you have to create spaces and you have to be in spaces where you can bring your whole self. You can bring all of the ugly, and the ugly will be embraced. And from that space, you will get support on how to unpack that, and be who you want to be in those other spaces.
This is good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the main question. Do you have any final thoughts, reflections for us as we process? Like I said, so much is layered, and you've already given us so much, I think, to take from our conversation tonight. But anything that's left on your heart that you haven't said that you think is important for the time of day that we're living in right now?
Yeah. There are a couple of things that I would say. One, thank you again for this conversation. This is so critical. When we were talking on the phone, one of the things that came to mind for me was what this time is about. And I'm going to read this piece by Arundhati Roy, and it's the last paragraph of her article, "The Pandemic is a Portal," which blew me away. Um,
Yes.
and it makes me think about what practices I want to continue from this time and
Yeah.
what this time is, like what this time is and what it could be. So I'm going to read this and share a couple of things that came up for me
Okay.
as I thought about it.
I have one other question too.
Oh yes, please. I'll answer the question first.
Oh, you want to do that one first? Okay.
Oh,
Perfect.
sure.
Shonda is coming with the question. So the quote goes, "What doesn't involve you should not involve. Not what doesn't what doesn't involve you should not involve you." Can you talk about why we focus so much on our overloaded emotions that don't serve us? Now, Shonda, you're opening up a can of worms, but I'm going to let you open them up because I think this is an important question. I'll let you answer that one. So can you see this question from
I
your end?
can. Can you tell me a little bit more what you mean by why we focus on our overloaded emotions that don't serve us?
Yes, Shanga, if you're listening, I already know you're listening.
Yeah.
Drop another comment in there.
So I would love to hear that, but I would start off by saying, there are a lot of emotions going on around this time, but I think that emotions are communications. And so I don't think that there are any emotions that are not meant to be. I think that what we do with them, how we make sense of them, how we make meaning of them, those are all of the things that kind of bring up whatever. So I think about all of the big emotions that I've felt during this time.
Yes.
Sadness, frustration, dejected, angry, happy, like all of them, right? They're so big and so much. And sometimes I can feel catatonic or paralyzed, right? It's the ability to make meaning of all of those emotions that's paralyzing. It's not the actual, well, sometimes there are emotions that they feel like they wash over me and like a wave that like took me under. And then I just have to sit with that, right? Like sit with the fact that that was really big, but then also sit with the fact that I didn't go under. Like here I am sitting and here I am able to move through them. And so I think, Shanga, to why do we focus on the emotions that are overwhelming? I think sometimes when we have a history of really big things happening, that it can feel like, and I think sometimes there is the belief that the emotion will take us under, like that it will be a tidal wave and we will not pop back up, that we won't be able to manage it, that we won't be able to handle it. And that belief is different than the actual emotion. And that belief that we won't be able to manage it, that we won't be able to handle it, is the piece that I would work on, right? So not so much the emotion, but the belief that I can move through it.
Yes.
Right. Because reality is, you just asked that question. I just asked, like, I've had emotions that I thought, okay, I don't know, but here I am. And here you are, James. And here we all are. And I teach my kids that too. Emotions can be really big and scary, but the reality is you can move through it. And sometimes you need support moving through it. Yes. And that's okay. But it doesn't have to take you under. And I think part of the reason that we focus on them sometimes is that fear, and that fear is the belief that we won't be able to handle it, that we don't trust ourselves, we don't trust the way, or we don't trust how we've handled it in the past.
Yes.
Right? We don't trust the ways that we've moved through it.
Yes.
We think that we might make a mistake again, or whatever story is surrounding that overloaded emotion. I would say gently, with so much grace and compassion, approach that story. And if it's too much for you, approach it with a trusted one, right? And unfold it in a way that makes sense and makes meaning for you. So the question of why, I mean, I think like this time, in uncertain times, we try to master what we don't know.
Wow.
And isn't that a statement for this time, right? Like we're trying to figure it out, make sense, control, and we do it, each of us does it in a different way. But the reality is that's a normative reaction to the uncertainty, to the 10th power that we're experiencing right now. From the racial tension to the pandemic, to when is this going to end, to what is the summer going to look like, to when are we going to travel again, to all of it, right? Like these are normative reactions to abnormal times. And to give yourself a lot of grace and mercy. So speaking of the times, I'm going to read this last couple of paragraphs. Is that okay right now, James? I know that we're near the end of our time.
Guys, if you're coming on in, thank you for your support on tonight. Please let me know, even if you're listening to this by replay, where you were chiming in from, and share this with your people that you care about, that you know want to protect their own emotional wellness. This conversation was definitely important. So definitely make sure you tag them. Been joined by my great friend and special guest, Dr. Cynthia Lubin Langtu, and she's going to read a couple of stanzas from I'll let you about how the pandemic has been a portal, which is still sticking with me. So
it is. Yeah. So I think about this time, like we're in this tunnel, right? Pandemic is a portal. Whatever it is, coronavirus has made the mighty Neo and brought the world to a halt like nothing else could. Our minds are still racing back and forth, longing for a return to normality, trying to stitch together our future to our past and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. And in the middle of this terrible despair, it offers us a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we have built for ourselves. Nothing could be worse than a return to normality. Yeah. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and our hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. I'm so excited about what we can learn and what we can bring into the future and what we can let go of.
Yeah.
Right? And isn't that right?
That resonates with me. And, you know, what I want you guys to hear tonight is this pandemic has brought us a gift. And I hope everyone goes forward seeking to create a new normal, not trying to recreate what existed before. I think that needs to be burned down and demolished and destroyed and put dynamite and blow it up, and not go back to what existed before. There may be old relationships, old thought patterns, old ways of coping. And this is a gift. This has been a gift to us, although I just love the way God works, that even in moments of crisis, these moments of crisis, again, as you were just saying, Cynthia, they really do become a portal to a whole new way of living. And so I'm glad that you were able to join me tonight, Dr. Cynthia. And guys, as I always say, we always have a gift for you. If you just check out, wrong one, this link below, we're going to drop it and pin it for you to collect your free resource as a gift for being a part of this conversation. And then again, if you need help navigating that new normal, feel free to reach out. I would love to talk with you, help you navigate through that. JamesPerkins.help. You already see it right here on the screen. Only thing is, just take off wellness gift. But I would love for you to schedule some time for me to talk. This has been an incredible conversation. Dr. Cynthia, thank you so very much for your presence here on tonight. And friends, until next week, we hope you are safe, that you protect your emotional wellness, that you take into consideration the things that Dr. Cynthia was sharing with us about how to protect the innocence of our children.
Yeah.
And navigating that, but also protecting your own emotional wellness. Yeah. And so glad that you guys were able to join me. And until next week, we will see you soon.